As we get into the autumn routine, how are things looking on the economic front for Lethbridge in southern Alberta? Well, joining us to discuss this is Trevor Lewington, the CEO of Economic Development at Lethbridge. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Trevor. Great to have you back with us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Jeanette.
Awesome. Okay, so Alberta has, of course, benefited from the boom in oil and gas prices. Now, even though our Lethbridge area economy isn't totally dependent on oil, to what degree has the energy sector affected business here?
Well, I think it's important for all Albertans to remember that, of course, oil and gas sector drives a huge chunk of our economy and therefore government revenues. So even though some of our industries don't benefit directly from that upswing, when the provincial government does well, institutions in our region, like our two post-secondary institutions, do benefit. Typically, municipalities get access to more money. So it's always a good thing when the oil and gas sector is performing well. But many of our local manufacturers and a lot of our service industries, for example, engineering, do a lot of work in the oil patch, not necessarily around here. But we have lots of businesses that sell up into Fort McMurray, sell up into other areas of the province. So again, when the oil patch is doing well, oil and gas drives a lot of activity in our region, even though it's sometimes hidden and people don't see it necessarily.
And, unfortunately, it does look like electricity and natural gas prices are going to be staying high heading into winter. Not exactly a good news story, but what impact could this have on the economy?
Yeah, certainly for consumers, electricity and natural gas is expected to stay high, certainly all the way through the winter. They're expecting rates to increase significantly as we move into the winter months. Constrained supply, continued conflict, particularly, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but just certainly general instability in the market. So, for consumers, if you're on a regulated rate option, now is a great time to look for a fixed rate plan and try and protect yourself from that uncertainty. Businesses, of course, very concerned about the increasing costs of utilities, how that's going to impact their processes, how that's going to impact their plans. And we'll see that rolled into prices, unfortunately, which just adds to potential further inflation. So certainly electricity and natural gas, a big concern and a potential drag on the economy as we move forward.
Absolutely. What are you hearing from the agribusiness sector? How are things looking there?
Yeah, this was a great summer from a primary agriculture perspective. Most commodity prices are at or near record levels. What I heard for the most part is, particularly in our region with the strength of irrigation, of course, yields were very strong. So you have most producers getting, higher than average crop yields, more stuff to sell, and they're able to sell it at even higher rates than usual. So that combined put a lot of money into the economy. Sadly, of course, demand is up around the world, particularly because of the situation with Ukraine, a very strong producer in the European continent, and there is definitely a global need for more foodstuffs. So our region has an opportunity to benefit, albeit under not great circumstances, as markets respond and prices continue to go up.
We seem to have a lot of expansion going on here in Lethbridge. Is the construction industry still continuing strong? Seems like it is.
Yeah, great question. It's a bit of a mixed bag, honestly. So housing starts, for example, are actually up overall compared to the same time last year. But we've seen a bit of a switch. So it's not as many single family homes, it's more multifamily. So duplexes, apartment buildings, those kinds of things. And there aren't as many large industrial projects. So if you think back a few years ago, we had construction at the university with the Science Commons. We had construction at the college with their big building, a number of large industrial projects. We don't have that at the moment. So although the sector is doing well, although there's some activity, employment in construction is actually at its lowest level since 2017. So that's a bit of a concern, something we'll be watching. Even though there is activity, like I said, employment hasn't quite responded the way we thought it would. So something we'll have to keep an eye on.
Okay, interesting. There is definitely some expansion going on at our Lethbridge Regional Airport. So how is that expansion impacting southern Alberta?
Yeah, so I think it's great news. Obviously, a functioning airport that connects us to the rest of the world is always important from an economic perspective, attracting business, but also attracting visitors. For folks that haven't been through the airport lately, very much more modern facilities, expanded lounge area with a washroom after security, which was great progress for us locally. But what it's driven, in fact, is WestJet has added now 3 flights a day, so increased service by WestJet to our market. And of course, starting in December, we'll see Flair Airlines fly directly between Lethbridge and Tucson. So it's great to have that sort of vacation destination added to the list, and hopefully we can attract more of those ultra low cost common carriers and those charter flights And so as a result of
Yeah.
that, even more work is happening at the airport. They are looking at rehabilitation of some of the pavement, potentially expanding some of the runways. So, if you're driving by, you'll expect to see lots of activity at the airport in the coming months.
Interesting. Very exciting too. I used to live in Tucson, so some of my best friends are still down there. So I
Well,
was very
now you have an
excited to
easier way
hear.
to go visit.
Exactly, exactly. So I was excited about that one. Okay, so besides the airport, we've also seen a large expansion taking place at Exhibition Park. So how is that living up to expectations?
Yeah, the Exhibition Park project, the Agri Food Hub is a very exciting project for our region. It'll give us a world-class facility where we can host literally any global event. So I know the team at Exhibition Park is looking to attract new conventions, new festivals, new kinds of programming for the building. So that's good news. We always like it when new and more visitors come to our community to spend their dollars.
Yeah.
The project itself, was originally slated for about a $70 million investment. So that in and of itself is a huge contributor to the local construction sector. And from what I hear, they're on track to complete the building on time next spring. We'll start to see events in that beginning next summer, which I think is very, very exciting.
Oh, super exciting. Exactly. It'll be interesting to see the change in Whoop Up Days too coming next year. Excited for that. So, Trevor, have you heard how the surrounding Southern Alberta communities are doing? Are they doing better or worse than Lethbridge?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. Again, it's a mixed bag. Most communities that are rooted in agriculture, of course, have done well. I think many small communities like Lethbridge are struggling to retain family physicians, and so there is a bit of a demand in the healthcare sector, which I think gives people pause for thought about whether they're going to relocate to a smaller municipality. So attracting and retaining talent, attracting and retaining residents is always an important consideration for rural communities, and so availability of physicians and access to healthcare is part of that. But there are a number of projects that are happening in municipalities around us. You look at some of the work that's happening in Coaldale on a joint sport facility and new school. Very exciting for their community. We've seen some industrial expansions in Tabor. Lots of interesting things happening along that Highway 3, Canada's premier food corridor, so it's known. Lots of investment and activity happening along that corridor. And we've also seen lots of renewable energy projects in our region. So there's many solar and wind things that are happening. So if you've driven along the region's highways, especially in the last few weeks, there's a lot of large turbine parts moving around, but there's many, many more projects in the pipeline. It's about $9 billion that's forecasted to be invested in our region over the next couple of years in renewable energy. And so that's driving a lot of activity for these smaller and more rural communities in our region.
Okay. What about employment? How are businesses faring now with the challenge of finding workers to fill job vacancies?
Yeah, that is probably my single largest concern as we move into the fall. We're just working through the job vacancy numbers right now, but the preliminary report that I saw yesterday, it's actually the highest level of job vacancy we've ever seen. So more than 6,000 jobs in our region are left vacant. They're jobs that exist that employers would fill tomorrow if they had a candidate. So that's very concerning. That's again a very high number. And so, two things come from that. First and foremost, if you're a business or a manufacturer or even an agricultural operation and you don't have enough labor, you may have to scale back production. You may have to curtail your business, which is a concern. And then, where are all the what are how are all of those jobs going to be filled? Where's that labor coming from? So there's much more work to be done. I think it's linked in part to the fact that our schools and post-secondary institutions were effectively shut down for 2 years, and of course, there was remote learning, but many students chose not to pursue their education during that time frame. Also, immigration was, of course, curtailed during the pandemic, very, very restrictive in terms of temporary foreign workers, and even people just trying to move between countries was obviously challenged with global airline access and all the public health restrictions. So, a big concern moving forward. I think it could be a real drag on the economy, and so we need to do a little bit more research into what specifically those numbers mean and where they're coming from. The sectors that are most affected at this moment appear to be things like equipment operators, truck drivers, and the skilled trades. So again, a concern because those are not jobs that you can simply replace with. You wouldn't want me trying to replace a skilled tradesperson, for example. I am not the electrician you want working on your building. So they take time to develop those skills, and it's important we figure out how we accelerate that pipeline of talent.
Right. It might be a good time to be young and job seeking, perhaps. There's a lot open.
It is absolutely a job seekers market at the moment, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. Okay, so there, now that Lethbridge's mayor and council has had almost a year to settle in, what kind of feedback are you hearing from business owners? Are they confident in this new leadership team?
Yeah, I think, what I'm hearing generally is that people are pleased there's a focus on the economy and being business friendly. So the new council did set out an action plan at the end of last year, right after they were elected. And they have their number one priority on their list was economic development. So they are very focused on job creation. They're very focused on becoming more business friendly as a community, which I think is good. There's a commitment to that. I do think the business community is very concerned about increasing costs that might come from either changes to utilities like garbage and water and sewer, or in fact, property taxes. So, as businesses are dealing with inflationary pressures on wages, or they're facing inflationary pressures on things that we've already talked about, like electricity and natural gas. The last thing a business wants, of course, is more costs passed on to them through higher taxes from a property tax perspective. So I think that's going to be the real pressure on this council is how do you balance all of your demands and all of your needs for new services and the costs the city itself is facing with this sort of general belief or this need from the business community to hold taxes as increases as low as possible? It's going to be a real challenge for council.
Wow. Okay, we've talked about different sectors. What about manufacturing? How are things shaping up with the manufacturing sector?
Yeah, our manufacturing sector has done extremely well over the last couple of years. So, exports from our manufacturing sector last year, so 2021, were just over $1.23 billion. And that was actually a 49% increase over the previous year. So, massive growth in manufacturing here in our region. Some of that is because what we produce, a good chunk of it is value added food, which of course the world needs more than ever. And food, even during a pandemic, of course, there's growth in people staying at home and having snacks. So we saw that. Many of our local manufacturers actually expanded their operations and added capacity. The other thing, of course, right now is you've got a bit of a currency advantage. So if you're an exporter, the cheaper Canadian dollar makes your products more affordable, especially if you're sourcing most of your ingredients and materials locally. So you can take advantage of those things. We have seen a massive surge both in manufacturing exports, but also in capacity. So that's exciting. That drives jobs in the economy, and hopefully we can continue to build on that success.
Yeah, for sure. Positive news there. Okay, we talked about the construction sector industry. So, with that in mind, are we seeing any changes in the real estate market now with interest rates rising?
Yeah, obviously interest rates are already having an impact and potentially have a much more significant impact moving forward. We have not seen it impact residential house prices or necessarily the number of houses that are selling. We're starting to see more homes stay on the market longer, so months of inventory has started to grow. But so far, the impact has been pretty minimal. I think as interest rates continue to climb, they are forecasted to keep increasing, that will add more pressure to the market, and you will see people potentially either defer their decision making until things stabilize, or perhaps consider an alternative. Perhaps I'll rent longer and perhaps not move into that first home purchase. So we haven't seen the true impacts yet. There's always a bit of a lag between when interest rates rise and when people make decisions. But I think that will continue to be a drag on the economy, and we will continue to see an impact in the housing sector in particular as we move forward.
And then, Trevor, finally, what are your thoughts on where the Lethbridge economy is headed over the next 6 months?
Yeah, the great thing about doing forecasts is you're always wrong, and I think that now more than ever, this is a very volatile time. There's a lot of pressures, as we've talked about, from interest rates to utility costs. There's a lot of volatility in the world from a geopolitical perspective. So lots of questions about Russia's next steps and the impacts on Europe, particularly as we head into the cold winter months. But fundamentally in Lethbridge, the raw ingredients are there. So our economy is very diversified. We have great talent. We have great, training and education systems. We have strong exporting businesses. The fundamentals of our market are pretty solid. So we're well positioned to weather the storm, but certainly lots of interesting challenges ahead, no question.
All right. Looks like we're about out of time, but Trevor, thanks so much for being with us today. Awesome to have you on always.
Always appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Trevor Lewington is the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.